This episode is brought to you by Hostfully. Using Hostfully, you can create a free digital guidebook for your listing so that you can save time creating a professional experience for every guest that comes and visits your spot. Learn more at hostfully.com.
Welcome to Get Paid for Your Pad, the definitive show on Airbnb hosting, featuring the best advice on how to maximize profits from your Airbnb listing, as well as real-life experiences from Airbnb hosts all over the world. Welcome.
Get paid for your pad. Get paid for your pad. Get paid for your pad.
Welcome to episode number 270 of Get Paid for Your Pad. Today I will be covering a March news update with Margot Schmorak, the CEO of Hostfully, and we've got some interesting stuff to discuss. Margot, how are you?
I'm great. How about you? And where are you? That is the important question for Jasper. Where are you?
I'm still in Barcelona. I'm going to stay here for a while. I officially live here now, so I'm not going anywhere anytime soon.
Settling down.
And you are in San Francisco, which is the subject of our first news article, actually. And this is something that we wanted to discuss a couple of weeks ago, 3 or 4 weeks ago when we last spoke. But we didn't quite get to it. But I thought it was really interesting because, all around the world, all these regulations have popped up, and it's gotten much harder to host on Airbnb. And about a year ago, San Francisco implemented these very strict regulations where in order to rent out your place, it has to be your primary residence, and you had to get a permit as well. And Airbnb deleted a lot of listings, although some of them were inactive. And it's really interesting to read this article in the SF Chronicle and see how the number of listings have evolved, and how in general, like the prices and the amount of homes and rooms that are online on Airbnb, to see how that has evolved, because I think the model in San Francisco is probably going to be copied in a lot of other cities. So let's chat about that first. And could you please, Margot, just please repeat what are the current regulations in San Francisco?
Yeah, so you got it right. So basically, if there's a home that is your primary residence, you can rent it out using the short-term rental model. If you have a second home, you cannot rent that out. You actually have to be living in your home. So what has ended up happening is that a lot of the rentals that were on Airbnb for short-term rentals have actually migrated to the 30-day rent type of rental, because people still want to get revenue out of those buildings, and they don't live there. But the funny thing that's happened over the past few months is that a lot of the renewals of the permits have come up, and the Office of Short-Term Rentals, which was just established a few years ago, it's sort of behind on processing all those applications. And a lot of hosts in San Francisco are in this weird in-between period where they applied for their renewal of their permit on time, but they did not receive the permit back on time. And so they don't know if it's okay for them to continue renting. And this article actually covers that. And it talks about how some of those bureaucratic things are really making it more difficult for hosts to host. And I think it's, the whole picture for hosts has gotten more difficult, and it has also for Airbnb, because now there's a really bright light shown on every single short-term rental. It must be permitted. They must be paying their taxes. They must have a valid permit that's up to date. And it's really making things harder for people, and then they have to deal with all the bureaucracy. So, when I think about Airbnb hosts today compared to like 10 years ago, we have a friend, his name is Ivan, and he was renting his place in the Mission about 10 years ago. And actually my mom stayed with him when I had my first kid. Abe, I'm sorry, his last name is Abe House. But anyway, Ivan basically has said that the way that he hosts is so different compared to how it was back then. He's always been renting a room in his house, but now with all the additional regulations and a lot more rules and stipulations within Airbnb, he's not having as much of a good time hosting. So anyways, it's changed a lot in San Francisco. And then when you take a step back and look at the overall number of rentals, it has really kind of capped out. So we had a huge flood on the market of a lot of entrepreneurial people feeling they could make a little bit of extra revenue by renting out their apartments. But now the regulations have slowed that down and taken a lot of that inventory off the market. And now I think Airbnbs in San Francisco are considered to be a lot more like hotels in that like it's just a natural thing to look at both inventory when you come and stay here. And there's been a little bit of growth. Like if you look at this article, HomeAway showed a little bit of growth. Airbnb showed a little bit of growth over the last few years, but it's definitely not that kind of explosive growth they saw from like 2007 to 2015 kind of thing. So anyway, it's an interesting market for a lot of reasons. And I think that there even could be a better job done helping host communities in their local cities advocate with their governments on how to manage regulations and set policies. And I think that there are other regions that are going to be really prominent in this as examples coming up, like Tahoe and New Orleans and New York. And we talked about that in our last podcast, right, about how New York is really cracking down and was able to find the big scammer, basically. We haven't had that kind of big case in San Francisco yet, but I wouldn't be surprised if something came out of the woodwork. We'll see.
Yeah, and I just heard that in Paris, the city had sued Airbnb because what happens in Paris is you need a license to operate an Airbnb now. And so what the city has done, they've taken screenshots on the Airbnb platform of listings that don't have an ID number mentioned on the Airbnb listing. And they've essentially said to Airbnb, like, hey, like these listings are illegal, so you have to remove them. But then Airbnb didn't want to do that, so the city sued Airbnb for illegal listings, seeking $14.2 million. But interestingly enough, the court has actually dismissed this claim, and the court argued that screenshots are not enough to prove that these apartments without an ID number are permanently available on Airbnb. They say maybe some of these apartments are available for less than 120 days a year, which in Paris is the rule. You can only rent out your unit for 120 days a year. And so, there's no way to prove that these units are doing more than that based on the fact that they're on Airbnb at any given time. And so, that's potentially a little bit of good news on the regulations front.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I've been able to connect with Greg Holcomb, who's the government relations director at the Vacation Rental Management Association. And his team is looking at all these different regions around the world and sort of doing some segmentation around what kinds of regions are facing what kind of legislative battles. So you'd put like New York and Paris and probably San Francisco in one category, which is like large urban markets. But then there are other markets that are more focused on like vacation destinations like, Aspen, Cannon Beach in Oregon, the Jersey Shore, right? So all the strategies for managing regulations and really thinking through what the right things to do, I'd put Tahoe in that category, the second category too. They differ, right? It's different depending on what region you're in. And I'm really excited to learn more about that and hear more about how hosts are joining into communities to think about how they can impact legislation everywhere. So it'll be an interesting next 5 years on that front, especially.
Hi, my name is Margot, and I'm the CEO of Hostfully. We are on a mission to make local travel a lot better, and we're starting with digital guidebooks to make that happen. Using Hostfully digital guidebooks, which work great on any mobile device on desktop and in print, you can share important property information and local recommendations with your guests. You can also save time and create a great guest experience that each traveler will appreciate. Hostfully guidebooks are very fast to make, and we've included some advanced features where you can feature your custom logo, your colors, custom categories, and essentially your brand. Please take a chance to check us out at hostfully.com.
And this kind of leads into our next article that we're going to discuss, and this has to do with the acquisition of Hotel Tonight by Airbnb. There's a very good article on FocusWire that kind of argues that Airbnb doesn't really get a lot of benefit out of this acquisition. But it talks about how Airbnb wants to be an online travel agency and not just a home sharing platform, right? And so one of the reasons that the the author of the article argues that Airbnb wants to become an OTA is because, a lot of the rental growth is not as spectacular anymore, right? In a lot of these big cities, there's not a lot of growth, and there's not a lot of growth in the future, probably because of all those regulations. And if anything, maybe there's going to be a lot of cities where listings are going to be actually deleted. Listings will be going down, like it did in San Francisco like a year ago, right? So let's talk about Hotel Tonight. What are your initial thoughts about this acquisition?
Well, Hotel Tonight, the CEO his name is Sam Shank. He's very well known in the travel industry for being successful at building travel companies, and I think he's probably really skilled in shopping around for a deal. And so, it was reported that it was a $400 million acquisition, a combination of stock and cash. Not totally clear on what the breakdown of that was. But what I think it means for Airbnb is really adding a team of seasoned leaders to their roster as they enter and prepare for an IPO, which will probably happen next year, because now they're saying maybe it won't happen this year. I don't think it will happen this year, to be honest with you. And I think they're adding a really valuable team. I think they're adding probably a lot of knowledge around how to merchandise and market hotel inventory, which is something they have experimented with, but they're not experts at. And then I think they also do get the inventory that Hotel Tonight has, and a really powerful booking engine that allows people to book last minute, so that probably it's very modern and scalable in the way that it's been built. And that's something that I'm sure Airbnb can find a lot of value in. I do think that since this news got leaked a while ago, that the deal probably was shopped around quite a bit. That's my hypothesis. I have no idea. I don't know any of these people, but so it's a little bit hard to say whether this ended up being a great deal for Hotel Tonight investors or not so great of a deal. I think it probably ended up being an okay deal. But for Airbnb and for potential customers who want to book on Airbnb, I think that we'll have to wait and see. I think it really depends on the execution and how they decide to bring the two companies together and merge the inventory together and merge the technology together too.
Yeah, I agree with what you're saying. I don't know the specifics of the deal either, because they weren't announced. But what I do know is that Hotel Tonight, I got the impression it wasn't going so well, and they laid off a bunch of people a couple of years ago. And when you think about their model, the model is to sell hotel rooms last minute, and I think there's a lot of hotel chains that are not very happy about that. The hotels, they don't really like when other hotels, kind of join this race to the bottom and keep lowering the price for inventory that hasn't been booked. And so it's interesting also that a couple of years ago, when I first tried Hotel Tonight, it's probably 5 or 6 years ago, I quite liked it because you would be able to get very cheap hotels last minute, and I often book hotels last minute. But a couple of years ago, they've increased the amount of days that you can book in advance. They've already increased it to 100 days, which means they're almost becoming like a regular platform almost. And so that tells me that they're
right. I mean, it reminds me of it's just one of those shopping sale sites, where it's it's just an OTA, but the format is more on mobile, and it's like flash sale, but 100 days instead of that night. Don't you think? I mean,
yeah, exactly. So that tells me that their model was just not working very well. Yeah. And I think the reason that the model wasn't working very well is because hotels don't like big discounts. I think that's quite well known in the hotel industry. It's something that just pricing the rooms lower and lower to fill up your last minute inventory is just something that a lot of hotels just don't really support. And so and a lot of the big hotel chains weren't connected to Hotel Tonight. And so the question that I have is, now that Hotel Tonight is associated with Airbnb, how many hotels are still going to cooperate with the app?
Yeah.
because I mean, all the hotels all hate Airbnb. So I can only imagine that the amount of hotels that are willing to list on Air Hotel Tonight is going to go down.
Yeah, and it's interesting that you're focused on the supply side because I would actually argue that on the demand side, which is like on the consumer side, um, I don't know how many people want to book hotels like for that night in general. You know what I mean? Like, and I wonder if that's how the deal was pitched to Airbnb to say, hey, our challenge has been reaching consumers who want to book in a short term time frame, and and we have some inventory, but we haven't been able to scale up the consumer side of things. So if we work with you, Airbnb, you have the consumer audience to reach people who are booking last minute. Because I do think people go onto Airbnb to find something last minute, and it's really, really expensive as a consumer company to advertise to customers and get them to book with you at the last minute and just get into their mindset. You know what I mean? When they're in that short time frame. So I wonder if like that was part of the upside of the deal, which was like you can put us in front of lots of consumers, and that's how you're going to get a lot of value from this business because we struggled with that, and we have some inventory, but the demand side of the marketplace is really what was expensive because it's a marketplace, right? And it's really expensive to build marketplaces, and it's really expensive to build consumer audiences. So I think like if you ask a random person on the street, like, oh, do you know about Hotel Tonight? I don't know if people would know. So you ask them if they know about some of these other companies like, Booking.com, for sure they know. Airbnb, usually they know, right? Like these are consumer brands that have been invested in over years with tons and tons of money. And I just think that probably Hotel Tonight suffered from that effect too.
Yeah, and in any case, it's a clear sign that Airbnb wants to not just be a player in the home sharing space, but they want to be an OTA, an online travel agency, and so they want to be able to offer different types of accommodations. And going back to that article in FocusWire, if you ask like why does Airbnb want to do that, the offer names 3 reasons. First of all, the first mover advantage is over, right? I mean, it's pretty clear. Like Booking.com has as many. Almost as many, or it's a little unclear who has more listings now in the alternative accommodation sector, but let's just say it's about the same. So clearly there's other bigger players that are jumping in the space. It's been like over 10 years since Airbnb started. So that first mover advantage is not really there anymore. Like I said before, unchecked rental unit growth is kind of over. The bigger cities, you can't really expect too much growth there. And then also on the fees front, and this is something that I think is really interesting, right? Because a lot of people talk about the different models on Booking.com versus Airbnb, right? Airbnb's business model is charging both the hosts and the guests. So the hosts are usually just charged the credit card fee of 3%. And then the guest fee can be, I think, anywhere between like 6 or 20% or something. The article says 6 to 10, but I think it can be more in certain cases. And so, the offer argues that, just like with the flight booking platforms, they used to charge a fee, but they're all free now. And the guest fees are probably going to go down as competition increases and as the growth. If you can't get much growth anymore, then you have to lower your fees in order to get some growth, right? So I guess the fees are probably going down. There's not much growth in terms of inventory, at least not in the major cities. And then the first mover advantage is over, which means that Airbnb has to grow. How you say that, vertically, or is that horizontally? I always confuse those two.
They have to grow vertically because horizontally the market is commoditized, right? They're just another OTA, and it's a commoditized layer in the industry, and so they have to grow vertically. That's why they're trying to go after experiences and flights, right?
Right, and Airbnb right now apparently has about 30,000 hotels with all the acquisitions and on its platform. But that's obviously that's a very small number compared to the likes of Expedia, Booking.com, etc. Another interesting point that the offer makes is that Airbnb is not really, in terms of technology, they're not really gaining a lot. According to the offer, at least they say that the technology that the Hotel Tonight offers is not really what Airbnb needs. It's not really not anything new, and so they're not gonna benefit from that as much. It's kind of funny. He says the people that really benefit are the investors in the Hotel Tonight, and I think that's probably true because like I said before, it looked like that company wasn't doing very well, and so if your company is not doing very well, the best thing you could do is, sell it now that you can still get a lot of money for it before it's worthless, right?
Well,
and so that's what
kind of
it seems. I think that's what happened, kind of.
That is kind of what happened because the sale price was $400 million cash in stock, and the last valuation in 2017, implied valuation, which is when investors put in money and then they say that the company is worth something, was $463 million, and that was in 2017. So basically, they sold for less than their last valuation, which is a loss because I'm sure they spent money in between when they raised and the sale as well, right? So,
absolutely.
So they ended up spending investors' money and then probably not giving investors back much money, but maybe some people got, like early investors ended up getting some sort of return, but it's really unclear. Yeah.
And going back to Booking.com, there's an article on Skift as well where one of the Glenn Fogel is his name. Mm-hmm. He is he the CEO? Yeah, I guess he is the CEO. He kind of comments on this acquisition, and he's not very impressed. But Booking.com has 29 million listings, and about 6 million of those are kind of like vacation rental home sharing type of listings, and the rest are hotel listings. So if you compare Airbnb to something like Booking.com, then Airbnb has a long way to go if it wants to compete on the hotel level.
That's right.
And I think the main reason why they're doing it is because of that IPO, right? They don't want to be dependent on just one business model, and that's why they did experiences as well, which I haven't heard of. I haven't heard much about the experiences for a long time, which tells me that it's probably not going that well either.
I totally agree with you. The other thing is that Booking.com has a lot of incentive to say not so nice things about Airbnb. So, in terms of PR, of course, the CEO is going to say, oh, we've got almost 30 million listings. Airbnb only has 6. It's not so cut and dry, but he is right in that they have a ton more inventory and that Airbnb needs to find ways to have a bigger footprint if they want to make a meaningful story around growth. Because like you're saying, they just have to increase the type of inventory that they have. The next most logical thing is hotels, because what else is there? Like boats, right? And there actually are booking platforms for renting boats. I've seen a few of those pitches. But anyway, yeah, I think it's going to be the stage that Airbnb is in right now is all about optimizing their current business and finding 1 or 2 really solid growth models. And I think they've struggled with that. It will be interesting to see where they go next.
Yeah, and one of the benefits could be that Airbnb is adding a large user base of non-Airbnb customers, to their already existing user base. But I don't know. I feel like Hotel Tonight and Airbnb is they're both like travel apps. If somebody uses Hotel Tonight, my gut feeling is they're probably on Airbnb as well.
Yeah, and also
what I mean? I don't see it as like people using hotels or people using Airbnb. I think most people use both, depending on the purpose of the trip. And if you're kind of tech savvy, then you're using both of them. No,
I don't think that the loyalty is there with the Hotel Tonight users like there is with Airbnb. I think that Airbnb has a quote unquote loyal user base, and then they're trying to add more, right? And then there are people who kind of pop in and pop out. But Hotel Tonight, it just doesn't strike me as like having a loyal user base, like where people are coming back over and over again and booking. I could be wrong, but I mean, I'm in Silicon Valley. I talk to people in travel all the time. No one talks about it. So,
right. Yeah. So I also wonder how big that user base really is. Cause I mean, I've used it a couple of times, but I'm definitely in that category of not very loyal users. I am a very loyal user of Booking.com, though I will say. But hey, it was founded by Dutch people, so I have to be loyal to my country.
I just booked on Booking.com actually for a trip to Israel we have coming up. It was a tough experience, just like the consumer experience of actually placing the booking and also knowing what the inventory looked like. Really difficult compared to Airbnb, but there's a lot more inventory. The availability was better. The prices were better. So it was a perfect example of like how this is all shaking out between the different platforms. So if I had to.
One other thing I want to mention about Booking.com, like if they have about the same number of listings, but their listings are all instantly bookable, which the CEO mentioned in this article, which I guess, that's definitely true. Awesome. Well, that's some interesting stuff going on. I wanted to also share with everybody that the Airbnb Mastery Summit is coming up very soon. In fact, it starts tomorrow, March 21st. I actually was a speaker last year. I'm not a speaker this year, but there are some other interesting people are speaking. And essentially what it is, it's a 3-day event. And a bunch of really interesting people from the industry will be speaking. So you can get a free ticket and you can watch all these interviews live. A lot of interesting people: Erica Muller from Vrolio. I see Scott Shetford at AirDNA. So a lot of CEOs of apps. There's Chip Conley as well, who I actually interviewed in episode 26. I interviewed Eric Miller, who is a friend of mine who organizes this. He's one of the other Airbnb influencers, and I interviewed him in episode 175. Actually, he runs a business in San Diego, and that was one of the most downloaded podcast episodes of all my podcast episodes. So people really like listening to Eric, and I always look to for advice. So I think he always has some really interesting stuff to say. So that's also why I wanted to mention his summit, because you can join for free, and so you can get a lot of great information. Even though I'm not speaking, the other people are also very interesting to listen to. Pierre from Smart BNB is there as well, and he's always really busy because he's pretty smart guy. So if you wanna sign up for this, I've just created a very easy link for you guys. getpaidforyourpad.com/summit, and then it will automatically redirect you to the website. So getpaidforyourpad.com/summit. That's all you need to do to sign up, or to go to the website and sign up. It's free. Awesome. All right. Well, Marco, thank you so much for joining. And next week, of course, there'll be another podcast. And in about a month or so, we'll do another news update in April.
Sounds great. Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. And to the listeners, thanks for listening, of course. If you have any questions, email me at jasper@getpaidforyourpad.com. And if not, next week there'll be another podcast episode. So hope to see you then.
Get paid for your pad. 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 Get paid for your pad.